Who is Mr. Nothing? Half Russian, brought up English, a country boy, who always knew he was born to be a farmer, a lover of nature, which he calls his first teacher. At home on the land, yet an adventurer on 5 continents.
It's hard to underestimate the importance of farming and country life in my life. I was lucky to be born and brought up in the deep country. It was during the war, or just before and during the war, when there wasn't much in the way of alternatives. We kept close to the home, and my playmates were the big garden we had, the fields, our dog, and generally just that, the trees and the hedges and bushes, fields around where I lived. And there was a neighbouring farm that I discovered early on, and I just loved, and I used to often go there. The farmer and his men were very kind to me. It was extraordinary. I was one of these lucky children that knew what I wanted to be. I used to say I knew before I was born that I wanted to be a farmer. The old saying, keep your feet on the ground. I'm not one of those people that gets great visions and sudden insights. I seem to proceed by a lot of small, what I call windows of realization, just little steps forward, bit by bit, unfolding the great mystery.
Oh. I've spoken before how really in my early 20s, when I started to farm and started looking at the damage that we do to nature, I remember particularly just seeing the ploughed up ruts on soft ground where heavy machinery had passed, and feeling this like wounded flesh. And I think somewhere along the way, with that, and of course the Lamb of God, because I kept sheep in those days, and Jesus is referred to as the Lamb of God. And this paradox is presented to anybody that keeps sheep, that lambs are sent to be killed and eaten by man. I think this widened my understanding of Jesus. Perhaps I didn't see it very clearly then, but I began to realize that Jesus isn't only a man, that Jesus is actually the sort of principle of Jesus is represented over and over again in everything that is sacrificed for man. Mother Earth, the creatures that we eat, the fruit and vegetables that we eat, crush with our teeth, and also, of course, every person that is sacrificed over and over again. I mean, almost all of us, every person to some extent is sacrificed for the sake of others.
Let me emphasize again that spiritual work is a long, gradual process, and we have to start from where we are. And most of us, when we start to meditate, are very much in our bodies, very much identified with the body, and even more so with the mind. So how can we possibly just, like a frog, go 1, 2, 3 and jump out of them? And even if we do get a moment of doing that, we soon find ourselves back again, don't we?
When I was sent to boarding school at the age of 7 and first met
the discomfort to me of human society, especially the world of other little boys, which was certainly very discomforting to me as a quiet, shy, rather lonely boy, used to my own company. Suddenly being expected to be interested in sport and competitive games and that, which were completely alien to me. My escape route was, fortunately, the school was in the country. It was to just get as far away as I could and go back to my beloved fields and woods. So instinctively I felt better in those situations. Many years later, when I began to, when I was more mixed up in myself, having got thoroughly sort of indoctrinated in the ways of society and man, and with all its worries about what I should or shouldn't be in the past and the future and all that, and then started looking to philosophy for my answers, and discovered this little book, The Practice of the Presence of God. Well, it quite soon just, well, this is what I know about anyway. This is just, that's natural. I didn't need to read a book to except to reinforce my own instinctive feelings. I was very pleased the other day when a lady in our little town of Bakewell called across the road, and I'd never seen her before, but she came up with great enthusiasm. Feet on the ground, she kept saying, listen and look. She'd been watching these videos and she'd got the message loud and clear. So I've had one little success in life. And I hope some more of you have also found what a wonderful connecting little technique it is. Feet on the ground, listen and look. Well, at the risk of boring you, because I'm sure I've told this story many times before, I was at school. It was my second school. I suppose I was about maybe 15 years old. We had little, what were called studies, really just a tiny little space where each of us had our things. And somehow I came across a picture of a cowboy riding up to the crest of a hill. And I loved cowboys at that time. I loved to read cowboy stories, and it was my dream to be a cowboy, really. And the caption to this picture was, "Don't fence me in." And even at that age, that seemed to just sum up what I longed for, sitting in that little boxed-in space with my school books. Yeah, even at that age, I yearned for the wide open spaces. Don't fence me in. A good horse underneath me and a wide horizon before. Oh, it does remind me of a song. Some years later, when I first heard that song, oh, I fell in love with it, and I've loved it ever since. Well, guess what? Don't fence me in. This is really, honestly, truly, seriously, quite apart from all the philosophy and spiritual stuff you've heard coming out of my mouth, I couldn't think of a better summary of my life than don't fence me in. I think I have dropped a hint now and then that I'd like that played at my funeral. I had an old monk friend who used to say what a good thing it would be in the great cities of the world, like London and no doubt New York, if they had a few hundred herds of cattle wandering around the streets. It would calm everybody down, wouldn't it? Be a marvellous way of just bringing a bit of peace and quiet to the place. Anyway, So there's something rather special about cattle. And if you've ever watched cattle, they have a sort of a calmness about them. We talk of contented cattle, don't we? They like to lie down and they like to chew the cud. Well, chewing is a marvelous sort of meditation. And if you watch cattle just chewing the cud, you know, they eat their food first without chewing it, then they have to sort of regurgitate it and then chew it. So they lie there for hours and hours just chewing the cud, like we chew chewing gum, same sort of thing. That sort of calmness about them is, at least for me, a sort of like a step towards what one might call spiritual awareness. I say this in all seriousness. There's something, well, impressive, something quite sort of wonderfully restful, calming about the presence of cattle like that. And when they're used for working, they've got that sort of steady pace, you know, wonderfully measured, steady pace. Great strength, so slow, wonderful rhythm to their movements. Calm, patient creatures. Up and down the rows they'll go, pulling a plough or a cart or something. Well, I fell in love with them when I was a schoolboy. And in those days, they were so quite common to see them in Europe. I saw plenty in France, in Spain, and Italy. I remember in Italy, they had a beautiful white breed called Chianinas. And working oxen, usually cattle, are killed at a couple of years old, at least cattle are going for meat. So you never really see how big they get. But a working bullock will live anything up to 20 years. And they grow enormous, huge, great creatures with great, big, massive horns. So to a little boy standing beside them, they were impressive, to say the least. Anyway, just wondering about, when I was in Australia, of course, I was interested in them. And in those days, there were still one or two big bullock teams of oxen. And I was very lucky to find one where this man had 16 oxen. And 16 of these enormous creatures, all with a wooden yoke across their heads and linked by a chain. And I was absolutely thrilled. He was the nicest of men, and he told me all about how to train them and everything I could. I just loved these creatures and just wanted to learn everything I could about them. And he was so kind. He taught me all I wanted to know. And I remember it was a little clearing in the jungle in the north of Australia, which is really jungle, rainforest up there. And one day we went out into a clearing and I saw them working. And I remembered that as it was yesterday. So I must have been very, very, very wide awake, sort of super awake. And one of the interesting things about spiritual life is that you realize that we are very seldom actually awake. We actually are half asleep most of our time. Of course, we love to always blame the other person, don't we? This is a favourite ploy. But a more mature understanding brings the blame, back to me. I mean, why do we behave so awfully at times? We do. We try to be good, but St. Paul says it beautifully, doesn't he, in one of his epistles? The good that I do, I don't do, and I would like to try to think good thoughts and I think bad ones. It's just inherent, or it's just taken such deep root in us we can't prevent it. Is this part of a trial? Does God introduce this into human experience in order as a sort of, these things are sent to try us. Maybe it's part of our learning, part of what we have to take on board as a step towards explaining that we cannot save ourselves, you see, which is, again, part of the pride of the ego, that we can save ourselves.